Let's face it, Hollywood loves to sell you the same tired war stories, the same old heroes, and the same sanitized battles. But what if I told you that some of the wildest, gutsiest resistance fighter movies from the 1950s are the ones you've never heard of? I'm talking about renegade saboteurs, doomed freedom fighters, and rebel hearts you won't find in your history books. So, which underground classics actually changed the game? Stick around, you might never watch a war movie the same way again. The Silent Raid, 1951, Netherlands. Imagine staging a jailbreak in Nazi-occupied Holland, armed with little more than nerves of steel and a fake police car. That's the insane true story behind The Silent Raid, a movie that refuses to play by Hollywood's rules and delivers a heart-stopping lesson in real resistance. Forget your typical action flicks. This Dutch gem puts you in the trenches with an underground team so audacious they might just make Danny Ocean blush. The plot is simple but relentless. A group of Dutch resistance fighters plan and execute a daring daylight raid on a Gestapo prison in Leeuwarden, all to free nearly 40 of their own from certain death. Every move is calculated, every risk razor sharp. There's no John Wayne swagger here, just gritty determination, and the kind of underdog spirit that makes you want to punch the air. The director, Paul Rotha, keeps things breathless, using documentary-style shots to crank up the tension until you can practically hear your own heartbeat echoing through the cell blocks. This isn't just about action. It's about trust under fire and what ordinary people are willing to do when all the rules are gone. The real-life story was classified for years, but the movie doesn't care about red tape. It's a shout-out to the unknown heroes who risked it all for their friends and their freedom. If you're tired of cookie-cutter war stories, The Silent Raid is a full-throttle jolt of the real thing. You'll never look at an escape movie the same way again. It happened in Europe, 1951, Hungary. Tired of seeing the same faces win every fight? Try watching a group of war orphans turn guerrilla into the shadow of fascist Hungary. It Happened in Europe is raw, scrappy, and full of desperate hope. A survival story that kicks sentimentality to the curb and replaces it with real stakes. There's nothing romantic about this resistance, and that's exactly why it packs such a punch. Set in the immediate aftermath of World War II, the film follows a ragtag band of kids wandering bombed-out villages, dodging soldiers, looters, and starvation. They're not just victims. They're survivors, sometimes turning to petty theft, sometimes banding together with an outcast conductor who becomes an unlikely leader. As they take shelter in an abandoned castle, the line between childhood and battle blurs, and the story becomes less about war itself and more about resisting the destruction of humanity. Director Geza Radvanyi gives you no easy answers. The kids' actions are messy, sometimes brutal, but always honest. It's a stark antidote to Hollywood's sanitized coming-of-age war movies. The film's rough, documentary-inspired style makes every moment feel urgent. These kids aren't waiting for adults to save them. They're forging their own path, sometimes right, sometimes tragically wrong. Why should you care? Because It Happened in Europe is about the kind of resistance most war films won't touch. Survival against hopeless odds, the refusal to become a statistic, and the defiant spark that says, not today. Miss this film, and you miss a crucial chapter in the story of cinematic resistance. Trust me, it'll haunt you long after the credits roll. Decision Before Dawn, 1951, USA, Germany. What happens when the best spy for the Allies is actually a German soldier? Decision Before Dawn rips up the usual rules of the resistance movie and throws you into a world where trust is as dangerous as any enemy bullet. This is war seen through the looking glass, morally messy, emotionally fraught, and about as far from black and white as you can get. Hollywood produced it. But don't let that fool you. Shot on location in bombed-out Germany and packed with actual German actors, the film feels like a gritty Euro thriller, not a sanitized studio spectacle. The plot? The Allies recruit German POWs to act as double agents behind enemy lines. Our hero, nicknamed Happy, is handed a mission with almost zero chance of survival. infiltrate Nazi territory, and bring back vital intelligence. He's not fighting for glory or country. He's fighting because, at some point, everyone has to pick a side. Director Anatol Litvak keeps the suspense white-hot, layering the action with icy paranoia and slow-burn tension. Oscar-nominated for a reason, this film doesn't let you relax for a second. One wrong step, and Happy is dead. One moment of doubt, and he's branded a traitor by both sides. What makes Decision Before Dawn unforgettable is its portrait of resistance as something deeply personal and deeply lonely. This is spy work without the glamour, heroism without the applause, and a world where the only thing standing between freedom and execution is one man's guts. If you've never seen a resistance movie where you genuinely don't know who to root for, this one will keep you guessing and sweating until the very end. The Red and the Black. 1954, France, Italy. Love, ambition, and political rebellion collide in The Red and the Black, a sumptuous French-Italian adaptation that proves resistance can be as much about the mind and the heart as it is about guns and grenades. Forget dusty old novels. This is Stendhal with sharp teeth and a sharper tongue. The film follows Julien Sorel, a working-class upstart who refuses to play by the rules of France's stifling Bourbon Restoration. Sorel's resistance isn't the stuff of battlefield heroics. It's psychological warfare, seduction, and subterfuge. In a world where the rich and powerful call the shots, Sorel infiltrates their ranks, armed with charm, cunning, and an utter refusal to accept his lot in life. The stakes are as much personal as they are political. Every kiss, every secret, every betrayal is another act of defiance against a rigged system. Director Claude Autant-Lara pulls no punches, infusing the film with biting satire, bold visuals, and a pace that never lets up. Gérard Philippe delivers a knockout performance, making you root for a hero who's equal parts rebel and rogue. So why does this count as a resistance fighter film? Because it blows the doors off what resistance can mean. Sometimes the battle isn't fought with guns. It's waged in bedrooms, boardrooms, and between the lines of polite society. The Red and the Black is for anyone who's ever dreamed of toppling the system from the inside, one clever move at a time. The Red Badge of Courage, 1951, USA. Before you roll your eyes and mutter, "Not another Civil War movie," hear me out. The Red Badge of Courage isn't your standard issue glory fest. This one's about the fight inside, the resistance against your own fear, and the chaos raging between your ears when the world falls apart. Based on Stephen Crane's classic novel, the film plunges you into the mud, blood, and confusion of battle, where the only clear enemy is self-doubt. Audie Murphy, himself a decorated World War II veteran, stars as Henry Fleming, a young Union soldier who bolts at the first sign of trouble. But instead of damning him as a coward, the story takes you on a nerve-jangling tour of his guilt, terror, and desperate quest for redemption. It's a resistance tale stripped of hero worship, all raw nerves and second-guessing. Director John Huston ditches the usual battlefield heroics and zeroes in on the psychological torment of warfare. The editing is tight, the cinematography feels almost claustrophobic, and the voiceover narration gives it the vibe of a fever dream. This isn't a story about medals or winning. It's about the real courage it takes to admit fear and push through it anyway. Is it a Hollywood film? Sure. But it's one the studios tried to hide, slashing its runtime, burying it for years, which just makes it all the more powerful. The Red Badge of Courage is a movie about resistance in its most personal form. If you think bravery is only for those with bullets flying past their heads, this film will force you to think again. The Captain from Köpenick, 1956, West Germany. Sometimes, resistance isn't a shootout. It's a con, and The Captain from Köpenick takes the art of subversive rebellion to ridiculous, hilarious new heights. Based on the almost too crazy to be true escapade of Wilhelm Voigt, this film delivers the ultimate middle finger to blind authority. And it does it all with nothing but a second-hand uniform and pure nerve. Picture Berlin, 1906. Voigt, a lifelong misfit and ex-con, is so sick of red tape that he decides to cut right through it by impersonating a Prussian officer. Marching into Köpenick's town hall with a fake squad, he arrests the mayor and walks off with the city treasury, all because everyone's too scared of the uniform to question orders. There's not a gun fired, but the establishment never saw it coming. Director Helmut Keutner leans into the absurdity, transforming Voigt's heist into a razor-sharp satire of German bureaucracy and social obedience. Heinz Rühmann, as Voigt, is equal parts clown and tragic hero, making you laugh out loud and wince in sympathy, often in the same scene. Every bit of officialdom is skewered. Every rubber stamp becomes a symbol of mindless compliance, just begging for a prank. Why does this matter for resistance movies? Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight the system with violence. It's to expose it with cleverness and wit. The Captain from Köpenick is a celebration of those who topple tyranny with laughter, reminding us that even the most rigid regimes can be undone by someone willing to break the rules. Watch this one when you need proof that sometimes the uniform is the only thing standing between order and utter chaos. Odette, 1950, UK. Think all resistance heroes are gun-toting tough guys. Meet Odette, the real-life British spy who outwitted the Nazis, armed with nothing but guts, loyalty, and unbreakable silence. This isn't another Hollywood fantasy. This is a nerve-wracking true story that shatters every cliché you know about wartime bravery. Odette Sansom, a French-born mother recruited by the British Special Operations Executive, parachutes into Nazi-occupied France to support the underground. Her mission? Transmit secret messages, move in the shadows, and keep the resistance alive, all while dodging Gestapo agents on every street corner. But the stakes skyrocket when she's captured, tortured, and sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp. Her greatest act of resistance? Refusing, no matter the cost, to betray her comrades. Director Herbert Wilcox dials up the suspense, steering away from shootouts and focusing on psychological warfare. Anna Neagle's portrayal of Odette radiates quiet, stubborn courage, making every small act of defiance feel monumental. There's no swagger here, just survival and strength. Why watch? Because Odette reminds us that real resistance is sometimes silent. It's not about glory, it's about grit. When the world closes in, the boldest move is simply not to break. If you think courage needs a gun, this film will set you straight. Odette's fight was fought in the dark, and her victory was survival itself. Kanal, 1957, Poland. Think you've seen gritty? Kanal will shatter your comfort zone. This film throws you headfirst into the literal sewers of wartime Warsaw, tracking a band of Polish resistance fighters fleeing the Nazis, not through streets, but through a stifling maze of darkness and filth. Forget hero speeches or clean endings. Director Andrzej Wajda crafts every scene as a pressure cooker, turning shadows and echoes into a relentless, suffocating nightmare. What makes Kanal so unforgettable isn't just its brutal realism. It's the way it exposes war's true face. These aren't icons or action stars. They're battered, frightened people clinging to scraps of hope as they crawl through hell, forced to confront not just enemies, but their own breaking points. The deeper they go, the more their mission shifts from escape to pure, raw survival. Don't expect comfort or triumph here. Kanal refuses to sugarcoat. It demands you stare into the abyss and recognize that sometimes resistance is nothing but heartbreak and anonymous sacrifice. Yet, in all that darkness, Wajda discovers a fierce, almost defiant beauty, a tribute to those who keep fighting even after the world has moved on. If you want a movie that redefines what it means to resist, Kanal is absolutely essential. Just don't expect to come out clean. Paths of Glory, 1957, USA. Forget everything you know about war heroics. Paths of Glory is here to wreck your illusions and stomp on your expectations. Stanley Kubrick's anti-war masterpiece isn't just a resistance film. It's an indictment of every bloated general and self-serving officer who ever hid behind a desk while real men died in the mud. The story is set in the trenches of World War I France, where Kirk Douglas's Colonel Dax is handed an impossible order: send his men on a suicide mission or face court-martial. When the inevitable massacre occurs, the military brass decides someone must be blamed, and 3 innocent soldiers are chosen to be executed for cowardice, all to save face. But Dax doesn't roll over. He takes on the very institution he serves, risking his career, his reputation, and even his life to fight for a shred of justice in a system built on hypocrisy. Kubrick shoots the film like a waking nightmare. Long tracking shots through the trenches, looming officers barking orders, and the constant threat of violence from both sides. It's as tense and claustrophobic as anything in his later horror films, only this time the real monsters wear medals. Why does it belong here? Because Paths of Glory redefines resistance, not as some flashy battle, but as the courage to stand up to power, even when you know you'll lose. It's a savage, unflinching film that dares you to question authority and see the human cost behind every heroic order. If you're looking for comfort food, skip this one. If you want the truth, it's an absolute must-watch. The Silent Enemy, 1958, UK. Who says resistance fighters need rifles? Sometimes all it takes is a wetsuit, a homemade bomb, and nerves of steel. The Silent Enemy plunges you into the unsung world of naval sabotage, proving that World War II wasn't just fought on land, but in the deadly deep. Set in the Mediterranean, this film tracks real-life British diver Buster Crabbe, a maverick called to outwit Italian frogmen, causing chaos with their secret human torpedoes. Forget heroic speeches. This is all about crawling through wrecks, dodging mines, and defusing enemy gadgets in the black, freezing water. Every underwater sequence is a slow-burn suspense test, and Crabbe's squad faces disaster at every turn. You'll be holding your breath, not just because of the tension, but because it feels like you're down there with them. Director William Fairchild keeps it tight and relentless, blending technical accuracy with old-school thriller pacing. Even the villains aren't one note. The Italian saboteurs are depicted as skilled, desperate, and worthy adversaries in a silent chess match beneath the waves. Why is this one worth your time? Because The Silent Enemy puts the fight back in Resistance Fighter, reminding us that courage often comes in unexpected forms, and sometimes the greatest battle is just to make it back to the surface. After this, even a swimming pool will feel a bit more dangerous. Ashes and Diamonds, 1958, Poland. Here's a resistance movie that begins where most war stories end. Ashes and Diamonds isn't about storming barricades or blowing up bridges. It's about what happens when the dust settles, and the only certainty is that nothing will ever be the same. The Nazis are gone, but for Maciek, a young Polish Home Army fighter, the real battle is just beginning, this time, with his own conscience and a future that feels more like a ghost than a promise. Director Andrzej Wajda paints post-war Poland as a world stuck in limbo, lit by flickering candles and neon lights, shadowed by betrayal and regret. Maciek's mission: assassinate a Soviet-backed official. Simple, right? Except every victory is tinged with loss. Every choice feels tainted, and the parties feel more like funerals. There's energy and beauty in the film's visuals, but underneath, it's pure existential heartbreak. What hits hardest is how personal it gets. Maciek isn't some faceless soldier. He's a dreamer, a tragic figure caught in a rigged game. Resistance here is anything but glorious. It's lonely, messy, and maybe even pointless. If you're over tidy heroics, this film will haunt you. Ashes and Diamonds reminds us the hardest fight can start after the war ends, and sometimes the greatest cost of resistance is living with what comes next. The Captain's Daughter, 1958, Italy. Step aside, macho rebels. The Captain's Daughter flips the resistance genre with romance, guts, and high drama, all set during the chaos of the Pugachev Rebellion in 18th century Russia. This isn't your average sword-swinging epic. Young Masha, the captain's daughter, is thrust into the fire, forced to choose between loyalty, love, and sheer survival, as her home becomes a battleground. Here, resistance means more than storming fortresses. It's about holding your ground when everything is at risk. As rebel armies and imperial forces collide, Masha refuses to fade into the background. She outsmarts enemies, protects the innocent, and quietly stands as a symbol of stubborn defiance. There's romance, sure, but forget fainting damsels. Masha's courage shapes the battle as much as any musket or saber. Director Mario Camerini gives us lavish costumes and sweeping scenery, but never loses sight of the human struggle at the story's heart. The film pulses with emotional resistance, love, heartbreak, and the ever-present threat of betrayal and violence. Why does this matter? Because The Captain's Daughter shows that resistance takes many forms. Sometimes it's a sword fight. Sometimes it's saying no when everyone expects you to break. If you think all resistance stories are about men with guns, this film is your proof that bravery comes in many faces, and sometimes it's a woman rewriting the rules. La Pointe Courte, 1955, France. Want a resistance film that tosses out the rulebook? Meet La Pointe Courte, the original French New Wave rebel that defies tradition from start to finish. But don't look for guns and grenades. Here, resistance lives in the everyday battles of a working-class fishing village where each struggle is personal and every act of defiance is quietly radical. The story is simple. A young Parisian couple returns to the husband's sun-bleached Mediterranean hometown, now facing economic ruin. The villagers are fighting for survival against government neglect, corrupt officials, and the relentless pressure of modern change. But the real war isn't fought with violence. It's in refusing to let hope die, in holding on to love, and in stubbornly preserving old ways when everything screams, give up. Director Agnès Varda blends documentary grit with poetic beauty, painting the harsh landscape and even tougher people with gentle honesty. Every look, every argument is a mini act of resistance against despair. Why does this film matter? Because La Pointe Courte is resistance without the noise, a portrait of ordinary people who refuse to surrender even as disaster creeps in. Sometimes, the bravest thing is simply to endure, to preserve what's precious, and to keep believing in something better. If you want a war story where words and hope are the sharpest weapons, this is it. The Secret of Blood Island, 1958, UK. Some resistance stories are all about epic showdowns. Others are about keeping your soul intact in the face of unimaginable brutality. The Secret of Blood Island falls squarely into the latter camp, a harrowing tale set in a Japanese POW camp in Malaya, where escape is more than a plan. It's a lifeline. British prisoners languish in squalor, battered by hunger, disease, and the daily threat of execution. When a wounded female resistance fighter is smuggled into the camp, the stakes skyrocket. Helping her escape means risking everything. But refusing? That's a different kind of surrender altogether. As suspicion and paranoia run rampant, alliances are forged in secret, and the line between bravery and desperation blurs to nothing. Director Val Guest doesn't flinch from the camp's horrors, but he also never lets hope die. Every whispered plan, every act of kindness, is resistance. The movie thrives on tension. Will the prisoners trust each other, or will fear do the enemy's work for them? The jungle setting only amplifies the claustrophobia, trapping everyone in a deadly game of cat and mouse. What makes it unforgettable? The message is clear. Sometimes, fighting back isn't about bullets or bombs. Sometimes, it's about refusing to let cruelty define you, about daring to dream of freedom even when the walls are closing in. The Secret of Blood Island is a tribute to those who resist, not just the enemy, but the slow erosion of hope itself. If you like your resistance tales dark but defiantly human, this is one for the watch list. 5 Branded Women, 1960, USA, Italy, Jewish Yugoslavia. Okay, we're bending the rules with this one, but 5 Branded Women, though officially released in 1960, was filmed in the late 50s and is simply too fierce to leave out. This is a resistance film that doesn't care about heroes or clean-cut reputations. Instead, it's about shame, survival, and the explosive power of women pushed too far. Set in Nazi-occupied Yugoslavia, 5 local women are publicly shamed, their heads shaved as punishment for allegedly collaborating with the enemy. But instead of slinking off into the shadows, these fallen women make a bold, angry choice. They join the partisan resistance, turning their humiliation into a badge of grit and defiance. Forget redemption arcs. This is about vengeance and transformation. Directed by Martin Ritt, with an international cast and a raw, almost documentary style, the film cuts deep into questions of loyalty, identity, and what it really costs to fight back. Each woman faces her own personal demons and betrayals. Their path is never easy, and violence begets more violence. Yet, at its heart, 5 Branded Women is about reclaiming power in a world determined to crush you. Why does it matter? Because resistance isn't always noble or pretty. Sometimes it's ugly, desperate, and born of rage. This film refuses to tidy up the truth, showing that even in defeat or disgrace, people can become warriors. For anyone who thinks resistance only looks one way, these 5 women have a brutal, unforgettable lesson to teach. And that's a wrap. 18 hidden resistance fighter films from the 1950s that prove real courage isn't always loud or easy to spot. Which one surprised you the most? Or did we leave out your secret favorite? Drop your picks in the comments and subscribe for more cinematic deep dives. Share this list with fellow movie rebels, and remember, the best stories are often found in the shadows. Stay curious, stay defiant, and keep searching for those untold tales of resistance.